The air in the room changes before you consciously realize why. It might be a subtle shift in temperature, a flicker of light where there shouldn't be one, or a sound that doesn't quite fit the rhythm of the environment, a sharp crack in a quiet library, or a distant rumble on a sunny beach. Your sensory organs pick up these anomalies instantly, sending raw data flooding into your brain at nearly the speed of light. But for those first few critical seconds, you do not panic, you do not run. In fact, you do the exact opposite of what you assume you would do in a life or death situation. You wait. You look around. You ask the person next to you if they heard that too. You rationalize the anomaly, forcing it to fit into the comfortable, safe narrative of your daily life. It's just a car backfiring, you tell yourself. It's just someone burning toast. It's just the wind. This is the first betrayal. In the moment when every millisecond counts, your brain, the most complex and sophisticated survival machine in known history, is not plotting your escape. It is actively conspiring to keep you seated, calm, and dangerously unaware, sedating you with a delusion of normalcy while the threat draws closer. To understand why this happens, why the very architecture of your mind seems to crumble when faced with the chaos of a true crisis, we have to peel back the layers of civilization and look at the ancient wiring beneath. We like to think of ourselves as rational agents, pilots sitting in the cockpit of our minds, steering our bodies with logic and intention. We believe that if the building caught fire, we would immediately locate the exit and move toward it. We believe that if the plane began to plummet, we would brace ourselves and prepare. But the pilot, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, logic, and higher order planning, is actually quite slow. It requires energy, time, and data to make a decision. Deep beneath that rational pilot sits a much older, more primitive passenger who has been evolving for millions of years before language even existed. This is the limbic system, often referred to as the lizard brain, and specifically the amygdala. When the world is normal, the lizard sleeps. But when the pattern breaks, when the sensory input screams danger, the lizard doesn't just wake up. It hijacks the controls, locking the pilot out of the cockpit entirely. This hostile takeover explains the phenomenon known as tonic immobility, or the freeze response. We are all familiar with fight or flight, the adrenaline-fueled surge that prepares us to battle a predator or sprint to safety. But freeze is actually the most common initial reaction to sudden trauma. Biologically, this is an evolutionary holdover. For a prey animal, movement attracts the predator's eye. Freezing mimics death or invisibility, often saving the animal's life. However, in a modern crisis, a sinking ship, a burning nightclub, or an active shooter scenario, invisibility is not a defense. Yet your brain defaults to it anyway. During the 1994 sinking of the MS Estonia, one of the deadliest maritime disasters of the 20th century, survivors reported seeing hundreds of people simply frozen in their cabins or standing motionless on the deck as the water rose. They weren't physically trapped, they were mentally paralyzed. Their brains were frantically searching for a behavioral script, a mental map of what to do when the floor tilts 45 degrees. And finding nothing, the system simply crashed. This cognitive failure is compounded by a psychological mechanism known as Normalcy Bias. This is the brain's desperate attempt to reduce anxiety by simulating a stable environment. The mind abhors chaos. It craves patterns and predictability. When faced with ambiguous danger, smoke drifting under a door for instance, the brain runs a probability calculation. In your entire life, how many times has smoke meant a deadly inferno versus how many times has it meant a minor kitchen mishap? The statistics overwhelmingly favor the minor mishap. So your brain, trying to be efficient, filters out the catastrophic possibility. You sit there. You wait for someone else to move. This social tether is incredibly strong. We look to the herd for cues on how to behave. If no one else is screaming, we assume screaming is inappropriate. If no one else is running, we assume running is an overreaction. There are harrowing accounts from disasters where people wasted precious minutes finishing their drinks or paying their bills because breaking the social contract felt more terrifying than the undefined threat approaching them. As the crisis escalates and the reality of the danger becomes undeniable, the brain shifts gears again, moving from denial to a state of hyper-focused exclusion. This is often called tunnel vision, but it is not just visual. It is a total sensory narrowing. To conserve processing power for the immediate threat, the brain begins to shut down non-essential systems. You might lose your peripheral vision, seeing the world as if through a narrow tube. You might experience auditory exclusion, where the deafening sounds of sirens or screaming fade into a muffled silence. Or conversely, you might hear the heartbeat thumping in your ears, louder than the chaos around you. This is your biology trying to help you, trying to force you to focus on the threat. But in the complex environment of the modern world, this exclusion can be fatal. You might focus so intently on the fire in front of you that you fail to see the exit sign to your left. You might be so fixated on the weapon in an attacker's hand that you cannot describe their face later. The mind becomes a spotlight, illuminating one tiny patch of reality with blinding intensity while leaving the rest of the world in absolute darkness. Furthermore, this physiological shift changes your perception of time itself. This is known as Tachypsychia. Survivors of car accidents or sudden falls often describe the event as happening in slow motion. They recall seeing the glass shatter shard by shard or the ground approaching with leisurely grace. This is a trick of memory processing. Under extreme stress, the amygdala signals the hippocampus to record memories in high definition. You are absorbing more data per millisecond than you ever do in normal life. Every texture, every shift in light, every micro movement. When your brain plays this memory back later, there is so much dense information that it feels as though the event must have taken a long time to unfold. While this feels like a superpower, in the moment it can lead to a dissociation from reality, a dreamlike state where the urgency of the situation feels detached from your physical body, as if you are watching a movie of your own demise rather than participating in your survival. But perhaps the most profound betrayal of the mind in a crisis is the loss of fine motor skills and complex thought. As the body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, blood is shunted away from the extremities and the digestive system, directed instead toward the large muscle groups, the thighs, the biceps, the back. This prepares you for gross motor movements like running or striking. However, it leaves your fingers fumbling and numb. Tasks that are simple when you are calm, dialing a phone number, unbuckling a seatbelt, unlocking a door, become nearly impossible. There are tragic instances of people found dead in submerged vehicles or fire-swept rooms with no physical injuries, their hands bruised and battered from trying and failing to perform the simple mechanical action of releasing a latch. Their mind knew what to do, but the connection to their hands had been severed by the very chemical surge meant to save them. The logical brain screams, "Unlock the door," but the primitive brain has turned the hands into clumsy clubs, fit only for bludgeoning, not manipulation. Yet, despite this bleak landscape of biological limitations, there's a pathway through. The betrayal of the mind is not inevitable. It is merely the default setting. The reason first responders, soldiers, and pilots survive crises at higher rates is not because they lack fear or because their amygdala is missing. It is because they have overwritten the blank spaces in their mental library. They have replaced the freeze response with training. When a pilot hears a stall warning, they do not have to think. Their hands move to the throttle and the yoke automatically. They have built a new script. This is the concept of stress inoculation. By exposing the brain to simulated crises in a controlled environment, you can map out the neural pathways beforehand. You are essentially telling your lizard brain, "We have been here before, and I know the way out." This understanding transforms how we view survival. It shifts the focus from bravery, which is an abstract moral concept, to preparation, which is a tangible neurological one. Recognizing that your mind will likely try to trick you with normalcy bias allows you to question that initial feeling of calm. Understanding that you will lose fine motor skills encourages you to learn how to operate emergency equipment by touch and with gross movements. Realizing that the crowd will likely freeze empowers you to be the first one to move, breaking the spell of social paralysis for everyone else. The betrayal happens when we rely on our instincts alone in a world that our instincts were not designed for. The redemption happens when we use our higher consciousness to train those instincts, bridging the gap between the ancient survivor living in our brainstem and the modern world we navigate. Ultimately, the crisis is a mirror. It strips away the facade of personality, the social niceties, and the complex narratives we tell ourselves about who we are. It reveals the machinery underneath. It is terrifying to realize that the person you think you are, the rational, capable, heroic protagonist, might vanish the moment the alarm bells ring, replaced by a trembling creature waiting for a signal that never comes. But this is not a condemnation of the human spirit. It is a reality of the human animal. By accepting that the mind is prone to these errors, by acknowledging the fragility of our own executive function, we can stop taking our safety for granted. We can look at the exit signs when we enter a theater not out of paranoia, but out of a respect for our own biology. We can mentally rehearse our reactions, not because we are afraid, but because we know that when the moment comes, thinking will be a luxury we cannot afford. We must do the thinking now, in the quiet and the safety of the present, so that when the noise and the chaos arrive, we do not have to decide, we simply act.